Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year's, Western Standard viewers. Today, we welcome you to the Hannaford Show. I am Leah Mushit. I am filling in for Nigel Hannaford today. And to help us to welcome the new year, we have Barry Cooper, a professor of political science at the University of Calgary. He will help us discuss and understand more about Alberta independence today, which we'll definitely be seeing more of in the new year. So I thought it would be a great topic to talk about, as well as his most recent book called The Paleolithic Politics, the Human Community in Early Art. So thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Cooper. So I guess my first question for you today would definitely have to be with how plausible do you think Alberta independence really is? And if you think it is very plausible in the near future, when do you think it might occur?
Well, political scientists almost never predict anything because politics is about humans taking initiatives that can't be predicted. It's not a question of behavior. It's a question of I would say, leadership. And much of that will depend on how Laurentian Canada responds to the inevitable, I would say inevitable or nearly inevitable, likely rejection of the Memorandum of Understanding, which Premier Smith and the Prime Minister signed, a month ago now? A lot will depend on how the Laurentians respond to that, because it's not going to work. Anyone who's taken a look at the text or has performed an analysis of it realizes that there's so many escape clauses for the Government of Canada that they have absolutely no reason to push either British Columbia or the Indigenous potential partners, particularly for pipelines. So it's going to go nowhere. Then what happens? I think that probably Premier Smith will be put under a lot of pressure because it will be coming time for the various referenda to take place sometime in 2026. And then if that happens and she takes an active role in the pro-independence side of that, then suddenly independence becomes both respectable and, in the short term, more likely.
Okay. Well, I guess relating to that, since you're saying, political science just can't really predict that stuff and it's all about human behavior, how do you think because there's a petition that just got approved for signatures for Alberta independence. Sorry if I'm not speaking loud enough. There's been a petition that was approved for Alberta independence that was approved, I think, late December, but right before Christmas. And if they get enough signatures, it's going to go for a referendum vote. And say that the referendum vote gets voted as well for Alberta independence, how do you think Daniel Smith would react to something like that occurring?
This is the big unknowns about politics. I would hope that she takes the bull by the horn, so to speak, and leads the pro-independence faction, party, group, set of Albertans. Whether she will or not is obviously up to her and how she reads the political landscape. But if that happened, then I think it would certainly strengthen the hand of Alberta vis-a-vis. It's basically about Ontario and Quebec. We don't care much about what New Brunswick thinks about anything. And neither do Ontario and Quebec. They haven't thought much about the Maritimes since about 2 decades after Confederation. So it's not really about them. It's about Alberta and Saskatchewan vis-a-vis the central provinces, the big central provinces, Quebec and Ontario. And because of the question of Quebec, I mean, they've been talking about independence now as well. And if the Bloc Québécois wins, or the Parti Québécois wins the next election there, then the government of Canada will have, let's say, it'll have its business cut out for it, and that nothing but good would come of that for this province.
Like, so when you're talking about Alberta and Saskatchewan being the central provinces, and so it would be dependent on them as well. Like, so do you mean when if Alberta were to get its independence, would Saskatchewan be a part of that, or it would be more likely that Saskatchewan would be a part of that?
Yeah, well, that's obviously up to the citizens of Saskatchewan, but Premier Moe has made comments very similar to those of Daniel Smith and to some of the what they call the Alberta Prosperity people regarding independence, that it becomes a viable option. Why? Because Laurentian Canadians don't want to change what benefits them so enormously, which is, it's perfectly understandable. But they have to understand that we get a vote in this too. It's not just up to them.
Mm. Would it be more beneficial if Alberta was, if Saskatchewan joined Alberta in independence? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, it's hard to tell how these things will play out, but that is certainly a, let's say, live possibility. Say sometime late next spring, early summer, when the intransigence of Laurentian Canada becomes obvious, even to them, one would think. But the barriers to understanding in that part of the country are enormously high. But let's say they even understood that there's a crisis from which they will not emerge triumphant. That will be because the economic engines of the country, namely Alberta and Saskatchewan, are united on taking a different path. Again, we'll have to see what happens, but that's certainly a live possibility.
Okay. Well, I would also love to know your thoughts on the recent MOU that was signed by Daniel Smith and Mark Carney. And do you think this will actually go anywhere? Yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
I would say it was a triumph of obfuscation on the part of the government of Canada. They've left just so many loopholes that everything has to line up. Like the government of BC is going to have to change 180 degrees. They're not going to do that. There are well-funded spokespeople for Aboriginal communities that are opposed to any pipelines. They're not going to change because they're on the payroll. So what Alberta should do, if they want to play this game as well, is start funding Aboriginal communities that want the pipeline, and let's hear from them. That would make an interesting conversation, because both sides then would be in the back pocket of third parties, either the government of Alberta and the government of BC, or all of these anti-pipeline foundations, most of which are funded out of San Francisco. So there's a lot of really let's say interesting possibilities for a serious debate sometime in the new year.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I guess also you wrote quite a few articles about Alberta independence in the Western Standard. And one of them you were talking about how Carney's basically anti-Alberta policies was pushing more Alberta separatists. They're for it. Basically, more Albertans are for it. So I remember you wrote about how, this is just because I found it funny, about how Carney plagiarized his PhD thesis. And I just wanted to know more about that because I thought it was wild.
These were press reports
Okay.
that came out when he was elected leader of the Liberal Party. And he wrote his PhD at Oxford, which is quite a respectable university. But somebody did a comparison. I mean, you can do this now by computer, and it takes about 4 seconds. That indicated that a lot of the quotations without attribution were taken from other sources. This was brought to the attention of his PhD supervisor at Oxford, and the guy denied it. But I haven't checked it myself. I mean, God, it's unintelligible economics. I don't know this. I was just reporting what was said. I think it was in the Manchester Guardian. I'm not sure, but it was widely circulated. Put it that way.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember reading that the professor, whatever that was supervising him, yeah, said it wasn't plagiarized, but I was just wondering if he knew more about it because I thought it was okay. Anyways, what else? Okay, when did you start talking about Alberta independence, and what got you interested in the subject?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose the sort of deep roots of this were from my childhood. I remember going on a fishing trip in the Chilcotin in BC when I was about, I don't know, 8 maybe, and my two grandfathers were along. My dad was sort of organized the thing, and he took my two grandfathers along, and I remember listening to them talk about social credit, which was a government of W.A.C. Bennett, way back then, and I had one grandfather from Newfoundland, and the other was from Nanton, from Alberta, and they both agreed that this BC social credit was not the same as social credit in Alberta, and they talked about why. And the argument from my Alberta grandfather basically was that it was a way of Albertans taking an initiative because the government of Canada would not. This was during the Depression when Premier Eberhard was first elected, and my Newfoundland grandfather said that he was always slightly mystified by what he called Canadian politics, and the main thing that I remember from him is that he spoke of Canada as a kind of foreign country, as many Newfoundlanders did because of the let's say questionable election results in 1949 about the accession of Newfoundland to Canada. So then, I always started thinking about, what did these odd political parties mean? Then when I was an undergraduate at UBC, I had a very, very good professor of Canadian federalism, a guy named Alan Cairns. And he mentioned in a class one night on Canadian federalism, it took place in the evening. He thought it was rather odd that social credit and the NDP were called third parties by Canadian political scientists, when in fact social credit and the NDP were the major parties in British Columbia, and the third parties were the Liberals and the Conservatives. And he just sort of left it there and left us to try and figure out what this meant. Needless to say, none of us undergraduates, we sort of said, yeah, that's kind of weird, and left it at that. Well, then fast forward another, say, I don't know, 20 years, and I was teaching at York, and I couldn't quite understand the attitudes of my students there because they were so different than the ones that I had thought of as being normal. And so I taught a course on Canadian political thought. And then a lot of things became a lot clearer to me, partly in response to these Toronto students and what they made of the stuff that I made them read. And basically, the bottom line was that the myths of Laurentian Canada are not those of the Prairie West. And they're not those of British Columbia or Newfoundland, for that matter, either. So I started thinking of Canada not so much the way it was for my dad's generation. I mean, he was in what was then the RCAF, well, it is again. And he thought of this as a Canadian war effort and so on. But I was struck by how the self-understanding of Albertans, Westerners generally, is not that of of central Canada. So that was the kind of intellectual roots of this view of Canada as a very tenuous coalition that was established initially in the 19th century by the imperial ambitions of John A. Macdonald, which he inherited from the Brits, and it never really was based on any self-understanding of people who actually lived here. So then you can see where if the Laurentians are not willing to change the legal structure, and everyone has said since 1982 that it's impossible to open the Constitution again. We can't have any more amendments, which is complete nonsense. Of course you can. The question is, do you have the will to do it? So then that became the way that I looked at the relationship between Alberta and Saskatchewan and Ottawa, let's say. And it's not a structure that is viable over the long term because of the enormous wealth that has come to the two prairie provinces. So what we do about it, as Canadians, we all hold the same citizenship, is going to be very interesting. I don't think that the Laurentians are going to do anything. So it's up to us. We'll do it by ourselves, and that's where the independence question comes from.
I guess I have a question when we compare, I guess, Canada to the U.S. So it feels like the U.S. doesn't really have the same issue that Canada does, where some states are wanting independence from like the whole of the U.S. So you said that Ottawa and like Eastern, and you called it Laurentian, those people don't think the same, obviously, as like Western Canada does. So how come there's like this stark difference between the US and Canada if they were both like from the British Empire originally?
Well, there are two things that are different in the American case. The first is that they actually established a new regime from the British Empire after the Declaration and the war against the war for independence. The second is they also had a civil war, and we have had none of those things. We have never had any serious rebellion against Britain. Despite the rebellions in Upper and Lower Canada in the 1850s, those were not really serious rebellions, and we certainly have not had a civil war for obvious reasons, partly because of the slavery question, but also we've been able to make deals with the only, let's say, potentially secessionist part of the country, namely Quebec. And that's what the 1982 Constitution basically responded to. It responded to the growing sentiments in Quebec towards independence. So we had this, one of the most Machiavellian of our prime ministers, namely Pierre Trudeau, who put together the Constitution Act and put it together in such a way that it became difficult to amend. And that's why all of these esteemed Canadian political scientists say it can't be amended. We can't open the Constitution again. And as I said, that's not true. They don't want to open the Constitution again and reconsider the position of Quebec in the country, because they actually believe that Canada is a bilingual country. They think that somehow bilingualism and then the multiculturalism after that became defining characteristics of the country, which is also nonsense. Parts of Canada are bilingual. Parts of the Ottawa Valley, parts of northern Ontario, parts even of northern or central Alberta, and parts of Quebec are bilingual. But that's not the country. Those are parts. And the myth of Canadian bilingualism then becomes a kind of moral equivalent to something that we cannot talk about. Just as in the 1830s and 40s in the United States, nobody wanted to talk about the consequences of slavery in the South. But it's still part of the reality.
Wow. That's very interesting. And I would ask you more about also your book, but unfortunately we're running out of time since it has to be 22 minutes and my producer just reminded me. So, thank you very much, Barry, for coming in today. Really appreciate you being able to join us. And yeah, so if you guys enjoyed this, then you should definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube. You can also check out our actual website where we have a bunch of news. So it's westernstandard.news, where you can subscribe for $10 a month or $100 a year. Yeah, that's all I got. So thank you everyone for joining the Hannaford Show, and goodbye.